Every day, you make thousands of decisions. Most of them feel small. What to say, when to stay silent, who to trust, when to walk away. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Your life is not shaped by the decisions you think about. It is shaped by the decisions you make automatically. Highly influential people understand this better than anyone else. They don't rely on luck. They don't wait for clarity. And they don't overthink the way ordinary people do. Instead, they operate using invisible decision-making systems. Systems so subtle that most people never notice them, yet so powerful that they quietly shape industries, nations, and human behavior itself. This is not about motivational quotes, and it is not about surface-level habits. It is about the psychological frameworks the world's most influential people use to decide faster, calmer, and with terrifying precision. Most people don't actually decide. They react. They react to fear, to pressure, to urgency, to emotional discomfort, to social validation. When faced with uncertainty, the average mind seeks relief, not truth. Relief sounds like, "I'll decide later. What will people think? I don't want to make the wrong move. Let me wait for a better moment." Influential people do the opposite. They understand something critical. Indecision is still a decision, and it almost always favors someone else. Power never rewards hesitation. It rewards clarity under pressure. The first secret of influential decision-making is simple. They fully own the outcome before they make the choice. Most people ask, "What if this fails? Who will blame me? Can I avoid responsibility?" Influential people ask, "If this succeeds, am I ready for the consequences? If this fails, can I absorb the cost without breaking? Does this decision move me closer to leverage?" They do not outsource responsibility, not to fate, not to luck, not to circumstances. When you own the outcome, fear loses its power. Fear survives only when blame has somewhere to hide. There's a myth that powerful people have more information, better timing, or special intelligence. In reality, they have something more dangerous. They tolerate uncertainty better than others. The average person waits for 90% clarity, emotional comfort, and social approval. Influential people often decide with 60% information, moderate discomfort, and zero external validation. They understand a brutal law of reality. Speed beats perfection when momentum is at stake. By the time others feel ready, the opportunity is already owned. One of the most misunderstood traits of influential people is emotional distance. This does not mean they are cold. It means emotions do not control their decisions. They only inform them. They separate what feels good from what moves power forward. When faced with betrayal, loss, or pressure, they ask, "What decision gives me long-term leverage?" Not revenge, not validation, not comfort, leverage. Here's a question influential people always ask. What is the cost of not deciding? Most people only analyze the risk of action. Influential people analyze the risk of inaction. Lost time, lost positioning, lost respect, lost momentum. Often, inaction is the most expensive option. It just hides its cost quietly over years. Another truth most people miss: confidence is not required to decide. Confidence is created by deciding. Most people wait to feel confident. Influential people decide first, and confidence follows through execution. Decision leads to action. Action produces evidence. Evidence creates confidence. Confidence builds influence. Consensus feels safe, but safety rarely produces influence. When everyone agrees, no one owns the outcome, no one feels urgency, and no one is accountable. This is why the most powerful decisions in history were rarely popular when they were made. Influential people listen, but they decide alone, not out of ego. Out of clarity, they also speak less, especially before deciding. Silence gives them an advantage. Others reveal more information. Emotions settle. Power dynamics become visible. Silence is not weakness. It is information extraction. While others rush to fill space with words, influential people observe who panics, who dominates, who follows, and who hesitates. Another trap most people fall into is attaching their identity to decisions. If this fails, I am wrong. If I change my mind, I look weak. Influential people don't think this way. A decision is a tool, not an identity. Because of this, they can reverse decisions quickly, abandon failing paths, and adapt without emotional resistance. Power belongs to those who can pivot without shame. Influential people also think in longer time horizons. While others ask, will this work now? They ask, will this still matter in 5 years? Long-term thinking changes risk tolerance, patience, and emotional reactions. Short-term thinkers react. Long-term thinkers position. This is why influential people often look slow, until suddenly they are far ahead. Most people run from discomfort. Influential people study it. They understand that discomfort often signals growth, leverage, or independence. They don't confuse discomfort with danger. If a decision feels uncomfortable because it challenges dependency, threatens old patterns, or disrupts comfort zones, they lean in, carefully, strategically, intentionally. They also decide in private. Public decision-making invites pressure, validation seeking, and emotional interference. Influential people protect their thinking space. They execute publicly, but decide privately. Pressure does not create character. It reveals structure. When most people face pressure, fear narrows focus, urgency overrides logic, and emotion hijacks reason. Influential people feel pressure to but they slow their internal pace. Not physically, mentally. They understand this truth. The quality of a decision under pressure depends on the structure built before pressure arrives. That structure is not talent. It is pre-decided rules. Rules like, I never make permanent decisions when emotionally unstable. I never negotiate from urgency. I never trade long-term leverage for short-term relief. When chaos arrives, they don't debate values, they execute them. Before major decisions, they ask one silent question, is this reversible? If yes, speed increases. If no, analysis deepens. This prevents both paralysis and recklessness. They also limit options. Too many choices destroy clarity. Influential people narrow decisions to 2 or 3 viable paths because power requires commitment. One of their strongest frameworks is simple. Which choice will I regret less in 10 years? Not what feels safer now. Not what feels good today. Not what gets approval. They accept short-term discomfort to protect long-term integrity. They separate urgency from importance. Urgency is pressure-driven. Importance is value-driven. Confusing the two creates irreversible damage. Influential people also accept being misunderstood. Outsiders see moments. Leaders see trajectories. They do not over-explain. Time explains for them. Above all, they prioritize alignment over outcome. Outcomes are unpredictable. Alignment is controllable, even when outcomes fail. Alignment compounds. This is why regret rarely haunts influential people. They decide consciously, intentionally, and with ownership. When results fail, they adjust without shame. By now, one thing should be clear. Influence is not charisma. It is not authority. It is not dominance. It is clarity under uncertainty. The world's most influential people do not wait for perfect conditions. They build structure, decide with intention, and move forward, even when the path is unclear. In the next chapter, we will explore how influential people make decisions involving people, how they choose allies, cut ties, and protect power before it is ever threatened. Most life-destroying decisions are not about money, timing, or strategy. They are about people. Who you trust, who you listen to, who you keep close, and who you fail to walk away from. Influential people understand this early. Power is not only built by decisions, it is destroyed by the wrong alliances. You can recover from bad timing. You can recover from failed strategies. You can even recover from financial loss. But the wrong people cost years. They cost reputation. They cost leverage. They drain psychological energy. That is why influential people treat people decisions like high-risk investments. Most people treat them emotionally. And that single difference explains everything. Why some rise and why others repeat the same cycles for decades. The average person judges people by how they feel around them, by shared memories, by emotional comfort, by history. Influential people use a colder lens, not because they lack emotion, but because they value safety over sentiment. They ask, how does this person behave under pressure? Do their words match their patterns? Do they respect boundaries when nothing is at stake? Because charm disappears under stress. Patterns don't. Most people assume loyalty and then feel betrayed. Influential people don't assume. They observe. Quietly. They watch how people act when they gain leverage, how they behave when no one is watching, how they speak about others who are absent. Loyalty shows itself long before it is required. They also pay attention to small signals, missed commitments, subtle disrespect, boundary pushing, inconsistency, not because they are paranoid, but because small signals predict large failures. Most people ignore red flags because they feel inconvenient. Influential people treat discomfort as data. They understand something most people miss. Access is power. Who gets access to your time, your energy, and your information determines your trajectory. Influential people are selective. Without being loud, they don't announce boundaries. They enforce them quietly. Access is earned through consistency, through competence, through discretion. Not through history, not through emotion, not through promises. There's also a painful truth. Influential people accept early. You cannot carry people who refuse to grow. Trying to save everyone drains energy. It delays progress, and it creates resentment. Influential people help, but they don't rescue. They invest where there is momentum. They also avoid relationships where effort is unequal, where respect is inconsistent, where responsibility is one-sided. Because they understand this deeply, power leaks through asymmetry. When one person provides all the discipline, all the clarity, all the structure, imbalance grows, and influence erodes. Betrayal shocks most people. It doesn't shock influential people. They plan for human weakness. They don't react with emotion. They don't seek revenge. They don't create chaos. They respond with distance, with restructuring, with silence. Betrayal becomes information, not identity. When influential people cut ties or change alliances, they rarely explain, not because they are cruel, but because explanations invite debate. They know this. You don't owe clarity to people who ignore patterns. Time reveals truth better than words. Every influential person structures their world intentionally. They maintain a very small inner circle, a wider operational circle, and a large public perimeter. Most people reverse this, giving everyone emotional access. Influential people protect inner trust. They protect private doubts. They protect strategic thinking, because proximity is power, and not everyone deserves it. Influential people rarely ask, "What do you want?" They already know something most people forget. Words lie. Patterns don't. So instead of listening to promises, they observe behavior. They watch how people act when resources are limited, how they respond to boundaries, how they behave when expectations are unclear. Because intent reveals itself in friction, not in comfort. Most people confront directly and create resistance. Influential people stay quiet and collect data. They also understand the difference between confidence and control. Manipulative people disguise control as confidence. Influential people can see through it immediately. True confidence invites autonomy. It respects boundaries, and it remains stable under disagreement. Control demands compliance. It reacts emotionally to resistance, and it escalates when challenged. The moment control patterns appear, influential people reduce exposure. They don't negotiate with manipulation. Trust for influential people is never granted. It is earned. They create low-risk tests, small responsibilities, limited information, short-term collaboration. How someone handles small trust predicts how they'll handle real power. Most people skip testing and pay for it later. Influential people are also highly sensitive to energy drains. They notice conversations that go nowhere, people who create confusion, relationships that require constant emotional maintenance. They understand one rule: anything that drains clarity weakens influence. They don't argue. They disengage. When it comes to boundaries, influential people rarely announce them. They change behavior. They respond less. They reduce availability. They stop over-explaining. Boundaries enforced silently are respected more than boundaries debated loudly. Exits are handled the same way. Not every exit requires confrontation. Influential People leave through gradual disengagement, through role restructuring, through time-based distance. They avoid emotional explosions. Because silence preserves power. They also rarely seek closure. Closure feels satisfying, but it often benefits the wrong person. Not everything deserves an explanation. They let time, consistency, and distance create closure on their behalf, even when wronged. Influential people protect reputations. They don't attack. They don't expose. They don't retaliate publicly. Because reputation is a currency. Patterns reveal behavior. Outcomes expose truth. Composure increases credibility. When choosing allies, influential people don't look at position. They look at trajectory. They align with discipline, with decision quality, with growth direction. Position can change overnight. Character compounds. And finally, every influential person operates with non-negotiable disrespect, dishonesty, boundary violations. Once crossed, access is reduced permanently. No second negotiations. No emotional bargaining. Because power is protected by what you refuse to tolerate. Groups fail at decision-making for one simple reason: responsibility dissolves when accountability is shared. Most groups debate endlessly. They compromise clarity. They avoid discomfort. Influential people understand something critical. Collaboration without leadership creates confusion. They allow discussion, but they never surrender decision authority. In every high-stakes decision, they ensure one thing: one decision owner, clear responsibility, visible accountability. Even inside teams, power stays centralized at the decision level. Input can be shared. Ownership cannot. This prevents delay, and it prevents blame from disappearing. Influential leaders don't dominate rooms. They create structure. They define roles clearly. They set expectations early. They enforce standards consistently. Authority doesn't come from volume. It comes from predictability. People follow leaders who are stable, not loud. They also understand a delicate balance. Disagreement is allowed. Chaos is not. They encourage respectful challenge, data-driven dissent, honest feedback. But once a decision is made, debate ends, alignment begins. This paradox builds trust without weakening authority. Voting feels fair, but in critical moments, it weakens leadership. Influential people avoid votes on irreversible decisions, strategic direction, and value-based choices. They consult widely, then decide alone, because leadership requires asymmetry. One of the strongest signals of influence is calm under pressure. Influential people don't rush explanations. They don't defend emotionally. They don't escalate conflict. Calm signals control, and control creates followership. When resistance appears, they don't suppress it. They redirect it. They ask what specifically concerns you. They ask what data supports it. They ask what alternative is proposed. Emotion is turned into structure. Opposition is neutralized without humiliation. Once influential people decide, they signal finality, a confident tone, a concise explanation. No hedging. This removes uncertainty. People resist indecision more than they resist decisions. Influential people also avoid overpromising, because overpromising creates future weakness. They understate. They overdeliver. They adjust expectations early. Credibility compounds slowly, but collapses fast. They protect it relentlessly. Rules mean nothing without enforcement. Influential people enforce standards quietly, consistently, without favoritism. This creates fairness, not fear. And finally, influential people think in legacy. Before final group decisions, they ask one last question: what does this teach people to expect from me? Because every decision trains behavior. They are not just making outcomes, they are building culture. Most decisions shape moments, but a few decisions shape identity. Influential people understand a truth most people try to avoid. Some decisions cannot be undone, and waiting for certainty before making them almost always guarantees regret. This is not about tactics, it is about direction, because at the highest level of influence, there are no perfect options, only chosen paths. Most people believe there is a right decision hidden somewhere. Influential people know that is a myth. There is no right decision. There are only decisions you commit to completely. Hesitation weakens outcomes. Commitment strengthens imperfect choices. Power does not reward correctness. It rewards coherence. Every influential person eventually makes decisions that offend others, contradict expectations, and disrupt comfort. These decisions are not about success. They are about alignment. Influential people ask themselves, who do I become if I choose this? What version of myself survives the consequences? Because identity always comes before outcome. At higher levels, decisions carry moral weight. There are trade-offs that cannot be avoided. Loyalty versus progress. Honesty versus stability. Compassion versus structure. Influential people do not pretend there is no cost. They choose which cost they are willing to live with. Avoiding trade-offs does not make you moral. It makes you irrelevant. Influential people also understand something painful. Loss delayed is loss multiplied. They accept financial loss early. They accept reputation damage early. They accept emotional pain early, while it is still manageable. Most people delay loss until it becomes destruction. Early loss protects long-term power. Before irreversible decisions, influential people ask one quiet question: am I willing to live with this outcome? Even if no one understands. If the answer is no, they wait. If the answer is yes, they move forward without apology. Conviction protects peace. At high levels of influence, mentors disappear, advice conflicts, and data is never complete. Influential people decide without applause. They trust their values. They trust their experience. They trust their long-term vision. Validation follows alignment, not the other way around. Regret, for influential people, is not caused by failure. It is caused by self-betrayal, by avoided decisions, by compromised values. They may fail, but they rarely regret, because they choose consciously. As influence grows, options multiply, but power does not grow through acceptance. It grows through rejection. Influential people say no to misaligned opportunities, to distracting partnerships, to short-term gains. Every no sharpens direction. And finally, they accept a difficult truth. The most important decisions are often made alone, not because others cannot help, but because alignment cannot be outsourced. Solitude becomes the price of clarity. By now, one truth should feel heavy. Influence is not about controlling others. It is about controlling direction when certainty is unavailable. In the next part, we will uncover how influential people live with the consequences of hard decisions, how they maintain inner stability under criticism, and the final mindset that protects them from collapse. Influential people never blame circumstances, others, or luck. They ask a different set of questions. What was my role in this outcome? How can I adjust without compromising alignment? What lesson is embedded in this failure? They treat consequences as feedback, not punishment. Most people experience failure as judgment. Influential people experience it as data. External chaos cannot shake those who have internal structure. Influential people build mental boundaries. They regulate emotions. They create procedural clarity. They respond without reacting. They navigate instead of colliding. This is why pressure strengthens them instead of breaking them. Criticism is unavoidable. Influential people don't fear it. They use it. They ask quietly, is this criticism about truth or perception? Does it reveal a hidden risk? Can it be leveraged for improvement? Criticism informs decisions, but never dictates them. Most people react emotionally. Influential people respond structurally. They measure decisions not in days, but in decades. They ask, will this choice reinforce my trajectory 10 years from now? Will it strengthen or compromise my legacy? What patterns am I creating today that will multiply over time? When clarity disappears, long-term alignment becomes the compass. Influential people also understand something dangerous. Passion can blind. They separate passionate decisions that advance alignment from emotional reactions that distort judgment. They act from clarity, not intensity. Before irreversible action, they pause, not to delay, but to observe one last time. This pause allows hidden risks to surface. It allows clarity to settle. It confirms alignment. Most people call this hesitation. Influential people call it strategy. They act decisively, but detached from obsession with outcomes. They understand. Outcomes are shaped by forces beyond control. Influence lives in preparation and execution, not perfection. Peace comes from integrity, not success. This detachment is not apathy. It is strategic calm. Every high-stakes decision involves risk. Influential people do not see risk as a barrier. They see it as a signal to prepare deeper, a signal to innovate, a filter that exposes commitment. Risk never paralyzes them. It illuminates. They also maintain a constant feedback loop. They decide. They observe consequences. They adjust their framework. Then they decide again. Over time, this loop builds intuition that theory alone can never create. Influence is rarely won in a single moment. It is cultivated through endurance, sustained commitment, resilience under pressure, consistency of values. Every disciplined day compounds influence quietly, but relentlessly. And eventually, they realize something simple most people never do. Freedom is not granted. Freedom is created through decisive action. They decide. They move. They adapt. Indecision enslaves. Action liberates. Influential people operate on a higher layer of thinking. They don't just make decisions. They make decisions about how decisions are made. They decide how their environment is structured, how their time is protected, how their relationships are designed. Because the decision to build decision frameworks is more powerful than any single choice. They don't react to life. They design it. They understand something most people miss. Influence compounds. Not explosively, but quietly. Small actions, consistent routines, repeated words, clear standards. Over time, these decisions accumulate into authority. One clear decision today can shape outcomes years later, far beyond what is immediately visible. This is why influential people don't leave their days to chance. Their routines protect mental clarity. They reduce trivial decisions. They reserve energy for moments that matter. Focus periods early in the day. Reading and reflection. Small decisions automated to preserve bandwidth. Daily accountability to stay aligned. Routines are invisible, but they are the scaffolding behind extraordinary decisions. Influential people are also selective about exposure. They limit information. They limit relationships. They limit experiences, not out of fear, but out of strategy. They quietly ask, does this expand leverage? Does this protect alignment? Does this strengthen long-term trajectory? Every exposure becomes a filter. Value in, noise out. They don't think in events. They think in systems. They understand opportunity cost. Every action hides a trade-off. They prioritize leverage. Actions that multiply impact. They use inversion, avoiding what destroys them instead of chasing what excites them. They build redundancy, protecting influence. With fallback paths, they rely on pattern recognition, recurring principles over novelty. These models create clarity even when the situation has no precedent. And beneath all of this runs a silent ethical compass. Even in ruthless environments, they protect honesty, integrity, and reputation, not for morality's sake, but because influence without trust decays under pressure. Short-term advantage never overrides long-term alignment. Commitment becomes their hidden engine. They decide. Then they commit. They execute consistently. They adjust frameworks, not values. Half-hearted action creates regret. Full commitment creates authority. Stress doesn't scare them. They read it. Stress signals thresholds. It exposes leverage points. It reveals risks before they explode. Stress is not an enemy. It is information. And every day, they reflect. What worked? What patterns appeared? Which actions compounded influence? Which relationships needed pruning? Reflection converts experience into predictive intuition over time. This process creates something rare. Control without force, clarity without certainty, power without noise, and eventually, all insights collapse into one truth. Your life is the sum of your decisions. Your influence is the sum of your alignment. Your legacy is the sum of your ownership. Influential people accept this fully. They own their choices. They manage consequences. They control trajectory. And in this framework, indecision dissolves. Ego fades. Fear loses power. Only direction remains.